Hello and welcome to Conquering Mount Scrapmore with Brenda. I'm Brenda, and today we're with Diana from Quilts of Valor, Canada. Now, we're going to give you a different perspective from Quilts of Valor because we're going to talk about it from the Canadian perspective. And she also has some information about all the other Quilts of Valor around the world. So this is going to be a lot of fun today. Diana, how are you doing today?
I'm really good today. And Brenda, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate today.
Yeah, well, we've had quite a few viewers ask for somebody to come from Quilts of Valor Canada, and you were kind of an important guest. I was kind of like, oh, she's coming, she agreed, yay! I was excited. So it was good. It's kind of mutual thing that we're doing because I was so excited about having you on as a guest. So what we should do is we should get right into the questions we're going to talk about today, and hope you don't mind. Can you
Mm.
tell us about the generally, Quilts of Valor? Kind of take it more of a global perspective, and then we'll zero into Canada.
Okay. Okay. So a quilt of valor is presented to a veteran to as a way of saying thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Uh, in my case, to Canada. If you are living elsewhere, to whichever country has a Quilts of Valor Foundation or organization within that country. It's a way to kind of a quilt symbolizes a hug, a nice warm hug from somebody who is grateful for what you have done. And so that's why we present them. That's why we make them. And yeah, that's where we go from there.
So, okay, what makes the Quilts of Valor different in Canada than, because we have a lot of viewers from around the world, but also mostly a good chunk of them are in the US. But what
Mhm.
makes the Quilts of Valor Canada different than the US division? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'd have to say that when I look at what the mission statements are or the goals of all of these organizations, they're basically about the same.
Yeah.
Their idea is to present a quilt to an injured or an ill military member who is past or present. I mean, they take from both. And it can be somebody who has an invisible or visible wound. What makes it different in Canada is, from what I can see, is that we kind of accept. We have the sizes are about the same globally,
Yeah.
and the criteria for how you receive a quilt seems to be very, very similar from place to place. For us, it's really sometimes it's about the fabric, right? So in our case, we have some hug block quilts. We also have scrappy quilts. So we kind of take what's donated to us from a quilter who wants to say thank you. Behind me, you'll see the hug block quilt, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, right?
Yeah.
And in Canada, the hug block quilt is made with the kind of fabrics that you see behind me. In the US, those fabrics vary a little bit more. Canadians are a little bit more red and white. In the US, they add red, white, and blue. And I also noticed that in the UK, they add blue, and in Australia as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think it's taken from our flags, right?
Yeah, that's
Right.
right. That
Yeah.
would be, yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
very cool. All
Yeah.
right. So I didn't know that Britain and Australia also had a Quilts of Valor.
Yes.
Yeah, that is interesting to know. Why, okay, why did you get involved with Quilts of Valor?
I first got introduced to Quilts of Valor by the founder of Quilts of Valor in Canada, Leslie's Wall. And she came to one of my quilting retreats and brought us some information and told us about why she founded it, how she founded it. And she had these little hug block kits that she was selling. So our girls in my quilt retreat actually made 3 quilts during the week because we were all to bring to quilt retreat red and white fabric to make these blocks. So I think we brought all 9 patches and in red and white, and then made disappearing 9 patch quilts. So during that week, we made 3 quilts, and then they were donated to veterans, back to veterans. I bought some of those little kits from Leslie, and I took them to a family reunion and had people sign their names on it, took it home, put it together as a quilt for my father's uncle, who was a Second World War veteran
Oh, wow.
and lived in Manitoba. So I put it together. I had somebody else quilt it. My mother, who was in her 80s, put the binding on it. And then through Leslie, I shipped it to Manitoba to be presented to him. That was kind of my connection to Quilts of Valor. And every year I would do a quilt and maybe two quilts and get them back to her. And then in 2021, I was a program chair of my local guild, and part of the program I had was looking for somebody, and I contacted Leslie, the founder, and asked her for somebody to present at my quilt guild. And so up came two ladies who gave a Zoom presentation. And during the presentation, they said, "We need a representative in your area." Well, there was a little something went off in my head that said, "Oh, you could do this." And so therefore, the next day I volunteered, and that was my beginning.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
That was, you just happened to be in the right place at the right time and
And
willing
the
to do it.
opportunity knocked up there, said,
Yeah.
"You could do this," right?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful chair. Like, if we can we just get you to move just a hair out of the way so we can see some of those blocks? Those blocks are just fabulous. Oh, there's a, oh, the moose is cute, but where there's a tree, can we get the tree?
Where's that tree one?
That one's right side. Oh, there it is, right there. That is just adorable. And the Inukshuk there at top.
The top and the maple
Yeah,
leaf, of course, is very common for Canadians.
yeah. And some of them
And
are bigger
the
blocks.
poppy up in the top. The poppy is a very, very popular block. And actually, I don't know about worldwide, but in Canada, all of these veterans, many of them say, "Do you have something with poppies on it?" Poppies are kind of found in all the places that they have gone to for their theaters of operation.
Yeah,
And it really resonates with them. And the poppy is the Canadian symbol was developed here. That poppy that we wear at Remembrance Day
yeah,
was a Canadian invention, I guess, to say what it was, back after the First World War,
yeah.
and was adopted probably, and many countries are using poppies, right? So,
Yes, they're beautiful. Yeah. That
hmm,
quilt behind you is absolutely stunning. Okay. Now, what exactly are hug blocks? Because we're talking about that's a hug block quilt behind you,
right.
but we see them, do we see them only like in Canada? Or can you show us one? Like,
Well, I don't think that we see them. I think that we do see them in Canada. I think that they were first started really, our founder started these little kits, and she would take a sort of classic quilt block and add the fabrics to it. The fabrics are all developed now by Northcott Fabric Line company. And in the US, Northcott also makes their US one.
oh,
So they
okay.
have a US theme, and then they have the Canadian fabrics that have lots of maple leaves on them. This one here has shucks and maple leaves. Um, Maple leaves are pretty prominent in a lot of our things. The new line that they have coming out though is all poppies.
Oh,
So
wow.
lots of poppies. So what makes the quilt block? The quilt block, hug block is really something that we have patterns on our website. People can go and they can just make a block, and they can follow the pattern. They have to use the Northcott fabric to make it a hug block.
Right.
And then they send it into our hug block coordinator, who is currently lives in Nova Scotia. It used to be in Edmonton, and then the new coordinator comes out of Nova Scotia. So you send it off, and then that hug block coordinator will write the name of your town on that block. So this one here has a name on the town of it, and this one. So I kind of took a real quick look, and there are blocks in that quilt that come from Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Alberta, and they'll come from various places across the country. That hug block coordinator will take 30 of those blocks, and she will take them from various communities, and they're all pretty much all different when you get, and you can ask for a package of hug blocks and then assemble the quilt yourself. So, that's an easy way to kind of get started. When I started in 2021, I I requested a number of those kits, and we put those quilts together, my mother and I, in order to have enough quilts to get started.
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
and to present, right? So that's how we did that. But yeah.
Because I know, like, when I went to the last quilt show, I bought a few of them from you, and I forget what they were a piece, but that money goes to raise money for batting and backing and to
Well,
help
yes.
with the
Yeah.
postage and all the rest of this stuff, right?
We
I put a
we
nine and
actually
a
would
half.
donate that money back to buying fabric
Yeah,
for more quilts, right?
yeah.
And
So
yeah,
it's a 9.5 inch block, right?
it is. It's a
Yeah.
9.5 unfinished.
Yes,
So
unfinished, right?
yes.
And then you get them, you put a border around them because
I
not
put a
everybody.
border around because when you have 30 different people sewing that quilt together, that block, as anybody who's quilted for a while knows, when you put a bunch of them together sewn by different people, they're not always the same. The quarter inch is different for some people than others. So if you just take it, that way I don't cut off the points. If that block
Right?
is a little bit small, when you trim it afterwards, when you put a wider border around it, then you don't really notice that the border is a little bit smaller than the others. They're all matched, right?
Yeah.
So, and it kind of finishes it, it puts them, separates them a little bit, and they each block is highlighted then, right?
Yeah, and it's a
Why yours
key.
has a black all the way around each
Yeah,
one of your stars,
yeah,
snowflakes, right?
yeah. It's kind of a quick cheat, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're putting all these different blocks together. Yeah, knowing even that skill, how to do a quick cheat, is actually really important. But yeah,
Hmm.
but those hug blocks I bought were just adorable. They all went through really well, and I measured them. They all seemed to measure out right size, and I was like,
Hmm.
I was gonna trim one because I was a little, my quarter inch was a little on the skinny side, but I thought, nope, it's easy enough to trim if somebody wanted to trim it. Because, like you say, you end up with 30 people, making 30 different blocks. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Northpod, I'll put the Northpod website there too, so in case people want to order fabric from them or whatever,
Hmm.
'cause they do beautiful Canadian
Yes.
fabrics.
And in fact, on our quiltsofvalor.ca website, there is an online store that people can order from. So you can buy panels or you can buy like fat quarter bundles. I think a fat quarter bundle is 5 fat quarters for $25. And we'll make a couple of hug blocks. We'll make 3 or 4, I think, in the long run for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, good, great.
And each of
Okay.
the people that makes a hug block actually, other than if they bought a kit when we were doing those kits, when they make one, they supply their own fabric for that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so tell us a funny story about the Quilts of Valor.
One
I
that
mean, surely
resonates,
we all have a funny or cute little story about Quilts of
yeah.
Valor.
One of the ones that I was doing a presentation one night to a fellow who said, I asked him when he joined the services. So this fellow lied about his age and joined up. So it was before there was all the online stuff that people could check this stuff, right? You know how that went. Way back, I think it was in the early 60s. And he said to me, well, I could drive a Sherman tank before I got to drive a car because he joined at 14.
Oh no! Oh my goodness! Oh
So I,
gosh!
whenever I
Okay.
think, look, I remember this story. And but in all honesty, he's not the only one. As I do presentations to the Second World War veterans, I find that many of them joined when they were 15 and 16 and should never. One fellow got all the way over to Scotland at the age of 14 and a half or so before his mother was able to prove that he was not old enough to be over there during the Second World War, and the armed services, the Canadian services, brought him back. Now they didn't release him because they needed his help. He helped to train other guys about his experience. so
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
did keep, you know, but yeah.
My dad was turned down in World War II because he was considered essential service and he was not allowed to join. And
Mm-hmm.
after the seventh time, the military police brought him home. You're essential. You're not getting to go. It was just like, try it one more time and we'll put you in jail. We don't care. We're tired of arresting you and taking you back home. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he was pretty upset that he couldn't go fight, but you know, if you at that time were considered essential, there wasn't anything you could do, right?
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, it was, but yeah, to hear those, I know a few of my uncles got through a little younger than they were supposed to be, and
Hmm.
nobody said anything. It was like, oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So, do you have a sad story about
Well,
the quilts of valor or a tender,
I don't really have a sad one, but I want to tell you because this kind of ties into what we just talked about. So I did a quilt presentation a couple of weeks ago to a fellow who it was a Second World War veteran, and he said to me, I grew up in the prairies, and he said, I went to war. I was sent over to France, and he said, when I came home, everybody else in his family had stayed on the farm because farm workers were essential services at that point. So they were
yeah,
either too young or they were working on the farm. And he was the only one that went. And he said to me, I went over there and nobody knew where I was. Nobody understood what I did and where I'd been, and nobody ever thanked me until today. And that's one of the reasons why I do this, right?
yeah,
Is those tender stories. I mean, very many of the veterans say, nobody has really given me that thank you. And it's nice to get that from somebody who's you don't know, that comes back and says, I want to thank you for what you have done.
yeah,
Because you and I both benefit from whatever they're doing in whichever theater of operations that they're doing, because those are things that uh, we haven't done, and we didn't sign on the line saying we would just give up our lives for everybody else in Canada, and those men did,
yeah, yeah.
men
And
and
you're
women.
in most people's job descriptions. Yeah, be shot at is not part of, you know, be
Yes.
shot at and killed almost, several times.
Hmm.
Because I do know a few vets that were much younger and that had served, and they were like, yeah, nobody signs up for it. It's
Yes.
kind of,
You and I typically go to work. We kind of know where we're going to be today,
yes,
tomorrow, a month from now, and we know what kind of job we're going to do and what we might face. I mean, there's lots, I mean, policemen don't really know what they're going to face on a day to day job either. But these guys go and they don't even know what country they're going to wake up in a month because they might be sent someplace. And the deployments happen fairly quickly, I think, For
yep,
some of them, it's almost, they only have a day or two notice. Others they have a, they've signed up to be deployed. And so they know that it's coming. But
yeah.
uh, you know, each circumstance is so much different. It's such a different jobs. And, yeah.
Yeah, we have a friend, both their sons have signed up and then now are in current service. And it's like, yeah, they could, something happens. I mean, even the guys who are sitting in an office, in a personnel office or whatever, they could be, sent up because there's an emergency now here,
Mhm.
and it's
Yes.
like, yeah, it's
Well, and
whatever.
and today in Alberta, we have fellows who signed up to serve our country, and there they are out fighting forest fires. Not necessarily really trained the same way as the forest firefighters have been trained,
Yeah,
to be able to do that job. But they go out, they go to floods, fires, ice, wherever the
yeah.
Canadian government decides to send them, or the armed services decides to send them. Yeah.
Actually, I have a weird and funny story, I guess. Well, when we were up at Slave Lake, when all the forest fires were at their worst, uh, we saw a convoy of military, personnel carriers, the big trucks with the tent over
Hmm.
top, and full of soldiers coming up to fight fires in northern Alberta. And I just like, oh wow. Well, we knew the military was being deployed, but it's like, uh, okay, do they even know what they're supposed to be doing? I hope they've got like a training buddy or something, kind of thing. Otherwise, because fighting a fire up there is pretty bad. But I have never seen so many 18 wheelers in the Walmart parking lot. We actually had trouble finding a parking spot because of
Hmm.
all the big trucks and commercial vehicles. They didn't want to go further north because they didn't want to be trapped up there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, yeah, they were hunkering down in Slave Lake, going, okay, we'll just wait this one out. Okay. And the smoke was terrible. The smoke
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
awful. You couldn't, it was unsafe to drive.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, we did see the the military up there. It was quite something. Um, how do you join Quilts of Valor?
Well, on our homepage, quilts of valor www.quiltsofvalor.ca, there is a thing, that a little icon on the right hand side that says, the first one always says what's new, tells you what's happening. And then down the page a little bit, it'll ask you, be a volunteer. So you can sign up to be a volunteer. You can be a volunteer to help with all kinds of things. I mean, they're always looking, I think, for people that can help with, they've just recruited a few people to help with IT stuff.
Yeah,
We just got some new admin people. There are people who do the binding. There are people who will sew a whole quilt or just a couple of blocks. And they sign up and say they would. And that way they get information about what's happening in Quilts of Valor.
yeah,
And in my case, I'm signing up people kind of on the go all the time at these quilt shows to be able to help us with our sew days. And we hold some sew days, and those are people will come in. Some of them will put binding on. Some will sew the label on by hand. You know, usually there's either the 2 or 4 sides of our label to be sewn on, so they'll sew on labels. Others will just help people cut fabric or iron.
yeah,
Somebody came one week and helped us iron, so those are nice. But that's where you sign up to be a volunteer, tell them what your skill set is, and
yeah.
you want to be a volunteer.
Yeah, I mean that all of that is so important right now too, right? It's just
Hmm.
yeah, because I know like on Sundays at the Veterans Food Bank here in Edmonton, Alberta, the Quilts of Valor has a big sew date or community sew day where everybody gathers and they're cutting fabric or sewing or
Hmm.
whatever they can do, they're doing, and it's just I've yet to be able to get down there and do it that day because life is busy here, but you do what I do what I can, right, to promote
Hmm.
the Quilts of Valor. So
Yeah.
that's join them, buy some hug blocks, and send them back off to you. But if you're not in Edmonton, Alberta, and you're somewhere else in Canada or in the U.S. or
Okay.
anywhere in the world, look it up online and contact a volunteer. Send an email off. Like, how can I help? This is what I can do, or I'm starting to learn how to quilt, and this I think I know how to make half square triangles, kind of thing, right?
Our in Canada, we are organized into 6 different teams.
Yeah,
And so when you look up on that homepage, there's a taskbar up at the top that says home, who we are, what we do. And then there's some contacts. And under there, you can see all the people, the different positions. And then there are the coordinators. There are 6 coordinators across the country. So my territory is all of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Somebody else's might be all of the Maritimes. And so that person has, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, PEI, New Brunswick, all of those provinces. Quebec has their own person. Ontario has one. Manitoba, I believe, has one. And BC has one. So that we cover across the country. There's a place there to contact your local rep or
yeah,
your provincial team lead coordinator,
yeah,
and then you can contact them and tell them what you'd like to do. Ask them what you can do for them.
yeah.
And,
Well, I mean, and even too, let's say you have, I know we have the grannies here in Edmonton, but every once in a while, on an estate sale or something like that, you come
mhm,
across a roll of batting that's still in the bag, and stuff like that would be also
mhm,
useful maybe to the Quilts of Valor people, right? So
yes,
yeah, like
yeah,
any
yeah.
kind of donation you can make or monetary or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, okay,
We do have monetary wise though. We do have a program called support sponsor a quilt. So under the sponsor a quilt, the what they've deemed as the cost to actually make and put together our quilts is $250. So somebody who wants to sponsor a quilt sends in that $250 under the sponsorship program. I'm kind of it's fairly new to me, but it would appear that they can send it that a check to the team leader, the team coordinator, and that coordinator then gets the money into Quilts of Valor and allows us to buy all the fabric that is Northcott fabric and the batting, and be able to and then we can put their name on that quilt, right? This
Oh,
quilt
very
was
cool.
sponsored by, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. Very neat indeed. And some people have asked, does it really make a big difference to the vets whether they get a quilt of valor or not? Like some people are kind of like, why is it making such a big difference? And from what the reading I was doing, it makes a huge difference with post-traumatic stress victims, about quilts and that. But
Mhm.
what is your take on this?
So mine is usually, I find that lots of it is very emotional when you can invite them or do the presentation in front of their families. For their families, it's nice to be able to see that gratification. For the veteran themselves, I would say that the majority of people, we can't ask them if they have PTSD.
No, no,
So
no.
that's something that we can't ask. We say that they're injured members that either with a physical or a visible or an invisible injury, but we don't really, I mean, I can ask them if they've got some kind of an injury, but I can't really ask for specifics. Many times I'm told that they're medically released, but we don't know why. But
Yeah,
that would be one of the qualifications. If I see that they're medically released, then obviously they are qualified for a quilt. And but many of them will then say, on a day when I have a really bad day and things are just not going really well, I can take that quilt, wrap it around myself, and it tells me that there are people out there that they care what I've done. They thanked me for what I was doing, and it just helps them to, it just gives them comfort, and
yeah,
that's basically what we want to do, is to provide them with some comfort and a thank you for their service.
yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah,
Many times there's lots of tears. And I've done a presentation where the fellow was there and his two school age children were there that really did not understand what their dad did or that their dad had even really served.
yeah,
And when I did that presentation, then they asked a lot of questions that day. I'm sure that they asked lots after I left, but we talked about, usually when you do a presentation, you have a little bit of history and you can say, we want to thank you for your service. I understand that you've been deployed overseas and you've
yeah,
been to here, the majority, so many of them have been to Bosnia, Croatia, Cyprus is a really big one. People,
yeah,
then that causes those kids to kind of say, I didn't know you went to all those places. What did you do there? You know, it's very, very gratifying to be able to do those presentations and to have that happening.
yeah. That is, yeah. Too, our military got deployed when that big tsunami was in Thailand and all that. I mean, to help out,
Yes,
emergency relief effort for those countries.
yes.
I mean, that had to that had to do something to these people, right? So, yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Um, Last encouraging words, just the to
What would I say? Don't be afraid to step forward and be a volunteer. And I'm not talking just about our own organization. I'm talking about around in our community itself. I mean, Quilts of Valor is a national organization, but even within our own communities, there are many things that go on. You mentioned earlier the Veterans Association Food Bank. Donate food to these food banks. Donate food to things that they need. Call them and say, "Is there something you need?" Because most of them have those kinds of things. So we can start with little things, one step at a time, to
yeah,
help to build this. Right? I mean, I know that we kind of I've always done those kinds of things. I've always been a volunteer. I learned that at home with my mom, right?
yeah,
And so, really and truly, it, for me, it's kind of just carrying forward that gratification, that need to be to give, and
yeah,
so but don't be afraid to step forward and volunteer some way or other. It doesn't have to be a great, it can be that little sew on the label versus making a whole quilt because you feel that you couldn't do
yeah,
it. And we can't all make a whole quilt. I mean, you know that from what you're doing. Um, we can, but we might be able to do a part of something. So make a block, come and sew a label,
yeah.
see what somebody needs.
Yeah, because it's sometimes it's just overwhelming to, come you're saying what 30 blocks, so it's 5 by 6 layout.
Yeah.
right? 5x6 layout. Yeah, 30 blocks for some people that, especially someone that's new to quilting, is
Mm-hmm.
just a huge task, and they're like so overwhelmed. But as
Mm.
somebody who's been around the block, oh, you only want 30 blocks? Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. It's
That's
like,
an afternoon's work.
yeah, I can chain piece that in no time. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but
But I mean, as you know, quilting really is simple, one step at a time. You
yes,
start out learning to sew I mean, we pretty much sew straight lines,
yeah,
little, it's all straight sewing. We don't have to do a whole lot of fancy things for the quilting until we get to the final step.
yes,
I mean, then things become a little bit more complicated. And personally, I can't long arm. I don't like that machine quilting. I don't know about you, but that's not my part. So I'm really happy that I can make some blocks, sew them all together, and send them off to somebody who will gladly long arm them for our organization.
yeah. And you are right about stepping up. Doesn't matter what you step up for. The fact you need to step up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anyways, Diana, it has been just lovely chatting with you today. It has been just heartwarming. You've brought me to tears out of how many times? Just about, but yeah, it's been great having you here today. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for all your time and your expertise, and it's been great. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much.
So, did you want to know how many quilts we've done so far?
Yes.
Yes. So from 2006 to, I mean, we're talking, this is almost June when we're talking, and we are at 20,800 quilts that we have presented already. So then we still have some quilts in our on the go being made and all of those others, but that's how many we have presented since
Across Canada.
2006 across Canada since 2006.
Wow. Wow. Well, there's a
It,
lot of veterans out there too, right?
there are 185,000 plus veterans in our country. Can you
Wow.
imagine what it like is worldwide though?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an amazing figure. That's just like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay. So
Thank you. I
we've
want to
got,
say thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I was so excited, and I still kind of like, ooh, I'm excited to, but yeah. So I'm excited to get this up and posted for everybody to
Mhm.
see. So you
So,
guys, the
okay.
watchers, the people who are watching this, we want to thank you for watching and for all your support. Like Diana said, step up if you feel that, need to step up. Maybe you should be stepping up and helping out. It doesn't matter if it's Quilt of Valor, but just step up, because you'd be surprised how valued you are, right?
Mhm.
And what you're able to do, right? So until we meet again, I want you guys to take care. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
My husband and I would love to thank you for all of the amazing people that we have met along this crazy YouTube adventure that we've been having. We do free speaking engagements too. So if you're part of a guild and they're looking for, people to talk and, and chat with, in their monthly meetings, tell them that I'm doing free ones just to help the guilds out because it's been a tough time for the guilds as well. Share, like, and subscribe with your friends. Make sure that they're, they get the word out on us. That's the best way you can do to help us out. So until we meet again, I want to thank you. Okay, goodbye.